Once that's pressed open, I need to cut off these tails because remember these triangles were a little oversized, so we knew that when we pressed them back, it needed to cover these numbers 2 and 3, so there was at least 1/4 of an inch seam allowance around each side. So we have done that, and we were successful in determining the correct size. So now when I flip this over, I need to add 4 and 5. So I'm going to take this and put my straight edge on the line that is between the center square and 4, fold this back again, and see this time I really just need to cut off those tails. So I'm going to put my add 1/4 ruler there and trim those tails off of both sides. Then I'll be ready to add the other 2 bronze triangles. It's also, you get a lot of scraps and things in paper piecing, so it's always nice to have a wastebasket nearby. And you can also notice I have the cutting mat here, the sewing machine here, and my iron, if I swivel, is right here, so I can do each process without getting up and moving around too much. It will save you an inordinate amount of time instead of getting up and going to an ironing board every time you have to press a seam. So see, now this is what your block will look like. So now I'm going to take these, once again, I'm going to put a little dab of glue, and I'm going to put it on the fussy cut fabric because if I do it out here, this is going to be trimmed. And so I don't want to glue something that I'm going to be trying to pull back and trimming. So once again, I'm going to center this triangle. I have over 1/4 of an inch here, so I'll be able to do the same thing. And I can do 2 at once because I'm not going to catch this tail under this piece when I sew it. And now I'm going to go flip this over because the fabrics are right sides together. I'm going to flip this over and sew the line between the 1 and the 4 and the 1 and the 5. Again, you sew exactly on the black line because you don't want to sew beyond it. And I'll cut that thread where we initially started. And you can see that I've sewn all 4 sides, and when I flip this over, now we'll go ahead and press these back, and we've created a square within a square. Now we will trim all 4 edges of this at once, so we'll be ready to add the blue rectangles. Now I need to trim 1/4 of an inch away from this so that I can place my next pieces. So I've added 2, 3, 4, and 5, and now I'm ready to add 6, 7, 8, and 9. So I am going to take my straight edge and place it on those black lines, fold it back, and trim 1/4 of an inch away. I love paper piecing because it's so accurate, because since you're sewing right through the foundation, I know exactly how the finished block is going to look. But pressing is important because you have to make sure that there are no folds in here, or else this is not going to be the shape of your finished block and everything isn't going to match. Now that that is all trimmed, can you see that I have a perfect square again? And 1/4 of an inch of fabric extends beyond the square. But see, these are not actually sewn because we wanted to be able to fold those out of the way, and that is okay because the next piece is going to be sewn right to here. So we're going to flip this over, and I need to add 6 and 7 now. So I stacked all my pieces in order, so I pick up the next two pieces, so it's very easy to keep everything organized. And I'm going to just center it and add it to this side. If I accidentally added 8 and 9 before 6 and 7, since it's the same fabric and everything, it's not going to matter. But I'm going to make sure I put my dab of glue within the area that is going to be the finished number 7 piece. Because if I take it out here, I'm not going to be able to fold it back and cut it, because I will have glued it in place. So I'm going to do that, and see if you can see this is the corner of the 6th piece, so that's why I'm putting my glue within that piece. And I'll place this here. And the glue just makes sure that since I'm sewing it like this doesn't accidentally flip back, and I'm sewing it with it curled, because I want these to be totally flat. Now I'm going to sew from this side this entire line from here to here, and this line from here to here. Now I'm going to go ahead and press these two open, and then I'll add the other two sides. When I go to sew this line, you can see that it's going to fall right in between those seams, and everything's going to be fine. So I'm going to take and do both of these and press them, and then I'll show you how to trim this, and then it's just repeating the same process to complete the block. So we're going to take this, put it under here, Now I'm going to press these open, and I wanted to go this far because I wanted to show you that you have these odd shapes, and that's okay because the next sections are actually angled at this end. So we are going to go ahead and cut, and you'll see that all of these pieces will be angled, so it's going to be very easy to place these triangles and continue our block. See, here's the 4 pieces added. They've all been pressed. Now we're going to take it, and the next ones we have to add are the 4 triangles, 10, 11, 12, and 13. So we'll place our straight edge on those lines that separate that from the pieces we just added, fold this back, and now you'll see that we're cutting off a little bit more fabric because we didn't want to cut all of those angles before. But by trimming 1/4 inch away from the seams we just sewed, we're automatically going to create the angles we need to make it possible to add the next triangle. Now when I'm doing this, it doesn't have to be a perfect 1/4 inch seam allowance, but it gives you a guide to add the next piece so that since they are cut about 1/2 inch larger, that they're going to fit over the piece. So if this wiggles a little bit and you're off, it doesn't have to be exact, and you're going to be fine because you can adjust it when you add the next piece. So we have trimmed all 4 sides, but look at our finished piece now. It looks again like a square within a square. So now, if we flip it over, again, we're going to go in the right order, and sometimes some of my students will actually take these and cross them off with a pencil so they know they've been added. So when they turn it over, they know that it is time to add 10, 11, 12, and 13. So that's a good hint for beginners. Now, again, I need to place this. I want to place it within that triangle. So I'm going to put a dab of glue there and center it. Once again, we can do opposite sides. And in this particular case, we're going to be able to place all 4 sides at once, because you can see that this is at least 1/4 of an inch away from here. So I can go ahead and add all 4 triangles. Now this happens a lot when you're doing larger blocks, because the center is smaller and your seam allowances are closer together. By the time I get out to this point, I can add all 4 sides, and so it makes the sewing, trimming, and ironing process faster because I'm doing all 4 at once. See, so that's how it would look. Now I'm going to flip it over, and I'll sew on all 4 of these seams to attach that triangle. Now in this case, I've already attached 3 and pressed them so you could see how it would work. So I'm just going to place this final one so you don't have to watch me sew 4 sides, because now you already know how to do that. So I'm just going to add the 4th side so I can show you how to trim this again. And if you notice, by sewing exactly on those lines, all of my points are matching, all of my seam allowances are accurate, and I end up with a perfectly pieced block. See, there is my block with the triangles added. Now I will flip it over, and I need to add 14, 15, 16, and 17. So I'll take my straight edge, fold this back, and now I'm going to be cutting all of this away. And this is why some people get confused of where they're adding it, because you do have these scraps that you're trimming it away. That's why it's nice to have the pieces layered in the order you're going to add them, so you know exactly which pieces you're looking for and where they have to be added. So I'm going to do this on opposite sides. And I know I have to trim this long piece because I have 4 rectangles that are in front of me. I like to organize my blocks in the very beginning when I'm cutting them out and putting them on paper plates, because then I've kitted it for me. And when I'm ready to sew, if I want to do this in the evening and I'm tired, I can still sew and I don't make mistakes. And there you go. So you can see that I have this little pile of scraps here. And this actually, some people don't like that there's some waste in paper piecing, but actually if I had to rotary cut and cut out all of these odd angles and things like that, I would have wasted that much in fabric anyway. So to me, there's no waste to it, and it's worth it for the perfection of having every single point match exactly, being able to fussy cut the center, and ending up with a piece that looks like this. Now I've sewn the last 2 rectangles to this block, so I'll go ahead and press this out, and then we'll trim the corners and finish this up. Now I have to add the outside 4 triangles, so all I need to do is fold this back and trim this 1/4 of an inch away. And you can see right there that I went 1 stitch too far, so I had to pull that stitch out to be able to fold that back to cut the 1/4 of an inch. And that's not a big deal, but that's what happens if you sew a little bit past the line. So now I'm going to take this and trim it and go around and do all 4 sides. Since this is on the outside edge, I'm going to trim the entire outside edge of the block at once. So I'm not going to bother trimming these sides right now. It's just as easy, and it saves time to do the entire outside edge at one time. And look at our block now. So now we'll go ahead, and we are far enough out from the center that we can easily place all 4 triangles and glue them in place and stitch them. So I've already stitched one and folded them back so you can see what we're going to accomplish, and I'm just going to show how we would position the last one. Again, I'm just going to put a dab of glue right here because I don't want to go out and beyond this. Now in this case, we are going to sew the entire length of this because I don't want these to be sewn so there is no, it is not sewn at all into the seam allowance. If I did it here and here, all of these would be loose in the seam allowance. So when I get to an outside edge, I'm going to make sure I sew at least 1/4 inch on each side of this line so that I have sewn clear into my seam allowance. See how these extend down here, these extend down here, etc. So I'm not going to have that opening that I showed you before out the outside edge. Now all I have to do is sew this one seam and we'll finish this up. And see, I'm going to start at least 1/4 inch away. It doesn't matter because I'm going to trim everything 1/4 inch away from this foundation because this foundation is the finished size of the block. Now I'll flip this back and sew it and show you how to finish and trim the entire piece in one time. So there is my completely sewn block. Now I take my add 1/4 and fussy cut ruler from Creative Grids, and it has the 1/4 inch seam allowance around all edges, and it also has horizontal, vertical, and diagonal lines. So I'm going to place this on the block so that my foundation is centered right in the 6-inch square that is incorporated into the ruler. And now I'm going to trim on all 4 sides so my finished block will look like this. This is the finished block that has been trimmed by laying the Creative Grid squared up and fussy cut ruler on it so it was inside that 6-inch square. This table runner was done with this block just in different colorways, so you can see that it can be very striking as a table runner. And this project is in one of the books. If you notice, we did fussy cut the center square, and these were actually cut out of a striped fabric, and we centered the rectangles on this point every time we sewed them. So if you notice, the hearts are on top of each other, and so these are separate stripes, but the print repeats itself. So it gave a really nice element to the quilt, and it made it look very balanced. So I thought this was absolutely beautiful. This, and the border all came out of the same fabric. So it was just an Asian stripe that we picked up. So this is without adding pieced applique. Now I'm going to show you what we do if we add the applique elements. Here is the block, and if you remember, we prepared 4 appliques. And now I'm going to take a little dab of glue, and this is very easy to do because this was trimmed 1/4 inch away from the bottom, so that's going to line up with the outside edge of this block because we have a perfect 1/4 inch seam, and all I have to do is line that up right there, and everything matches exactly. Look how it's creating all of these triangles, and I didn't have to do any of that rotary cutting and any of that piecing. Since I'm positioning it from the top, I can make sure everything matches exactly. And if there's a little tail here, I can just go back and trim that if I don't want it in my seam allowance. But it's going to fall in the seam allowance, so I don't worry about it too much. So see right there, I'm matching everything up. And see how it's creating these flying geese units just by adding 4 triangles that were turned in just a few minutes. And this is paper piecing with pieced applique. I've created all of these flying geese units going out in each corner. Now I would remove the paper piecing foundation, which is very easy to do so I'm just going to pull these out, and you can easily do this. It's a great thing to do watching TV. And see, I'll pull this up. Sometimes there's that little dab of glue there, so I'm going to have to lift it up and fold it over. But if you fold right on the seam line, it tears right out without having to reduce your stitch length or anything. So I would continue to do that. And it usually takes 5 or 10 minutes to remove all of the paper. But the piecing results that you get with everything being exactly perfect is worth the effort. Now, you can go ahead and stitch these down with the paper piecing foundation in, but that just means that I am sewing the foundation in even more places, so it's harder to remove. So normally I remove all of the foundation, but I position these in place first, just in case that there are fussy cut lines on here or on the foundation that I need, or if something isn't working and I need to fix my foundation, I want to make sure everything's going to look exactly how it is in the finished quilt before I remove my paper piecing foundation. Now, once I've removed the paper piecing foundation and I am ready to sew these, I will put monofilament thread on my machine and a neutral thread in the bobbin, and I will take a narrow zigzag and go around here. I don't adjust the length of the zigzag, just the width, and stitch right here, right here, right here, and right here. It takes about 5 minutes. I'll dip the entire block in a sink of warm water, which dissolves the glue, and the templates will fall right out these open sides. I use glue stick that I get out the office supply store. I got these at Staples. It does say that it's permanent on here, but if you read the fine print, it also says that it's washable. So since they're washable, it comes right out. I can usually get these for less than $1 a piece, so they are much cheaper than the fabric glue sticks that are on the market. And in this process, I use quite a bit of glue, so why not use something that works just as well and is more reasonably priced? So this is your completed block, and that is your first experience with paper pieced applique. Try it. I'm sure you'll love it.